Chaser is an essential boss to learn, both for his unique drops, the Bloodforged Crown and the legendary weapon, the Flareblood Commas, both of which you can only get from him, as well as the necessity to fight him in order to actually advance deeper into Lair 2. So, this guide will show you how to get to Chaser, the requirements you need to get to him, a route to get to him, and just his attacks and general strategies on how you should be dealing with him. So, with all that in mind, let's get started. This guide will assume that you are using the services of Claris and Castle Light in order to reach the Lair 2 Floor 1, but if you're unsure, here's a quick refresher for people that don't even know what I'm talking about. Once you're power 15 or above, you can talk to Claris and Castle Light to head down to Lair 2. Before that though, there are a couple environmental mechanics that players do need to be careful of while down there in the first floor of Lair 2, that being the wind and the parasites. The wind in Lair 2 can forcibly push your character off the sides of bridges in areas where it's active and potentially into instant death zones if you're not working to combat it. In order to combat it, simply walk your character against the direction that the wind is facing until it subsides. You will know the wind is active because your character puts their arm in front of their face and you are greatly slowed. Secondly, there are the parasites. These act as an inevitable death timer for your character if not treated correctly and properly. You will see parasites begin to form on the player's body as you roam around the first floor, and after a certain amount has formed, you'll hear an odd noise like something's growing, ready to burst. But once it's happened more than a couple times, eventually the parasites will burst out and kill you, sending you back out to the Castle Light. Now, there is one countermeasure aside from just dying to get rid of these parasites. Various locations around the map will have special lanterns, allowing you to burn off the parasites currently on you, resetting this metaphorical timer. Be careful though, as you can only do this so many times before the lanterns essentially run out of batteries and become useless for you. There are a couple little things I'll tell you guys about as well that can slow the progression of parasites to make that timer a little bit longer before you need to burn them off. And those are the following. You have the Winter Parka coat that's often found at the Crypt of the Unbroken, having the Survivalist boon, and high willpower. These will all slow down the parasites, especially if you're trying to learn, so you have a better grasp on what you need to be doing before, exploring gets you killed. With all that out of the way though, let's go into what a normal Lair 2 run would look like, showing the basics on how to actually easily get to Chaser for the first time. So once arriving in Lair 2, follow the route on screen to get to the gate key, which will open the gate into the first area that you will be exploring. Follow along the path shown afterwards in order to head towards your first big objective, which is the Bone Keeper. The Bone Keeper is the first major obstacle to get to Chaser, as he guards a generator that'll let you unlock a surprise tool that'll help us later, as well as other parts of the map that we do need to get to. So we'll briefly go over his moves and how to defend against them. The Bone Keeper has 5 moves at its disposal. They are the following: the Javelin Throw, the Bone Wave, the Grab, the Shoulder Charge, and the Multi-Hit with a Stomp variant included. We will go over each of those accordingly, starting with its Javelin Throw. The Bone Keeper does a pretty long wind-up preparing to throw a giant bone. If you just stand still and watch the wind-up and wait for the bone to get closer once he throws it, you can easily parry it. It cannot be blocked though, it will posture break you. The Bone Keeper's Wave attack sends a big shock wave of bones towards the enemy. You can just jump over it. You don't need to parry, you don't need to block, just jump. Now the Bone Keeper's Grab is a very deadly attack, as it is a guard break, it cannot be blocked, it cannot be parried. Just dodge backwards as it arches its fist backwards slightly to get ready for the grab, and you should be okay. The Shoulder Bash move is rather simple. The Bone Keeper will charge in, a dash, and then just do a Shoulder Bash mantra essentially in the direction that he's facing. He'll dash to a certain distance and then begin another move, typically a ranged one. However, if you parry the attack, he will end his dash much earlier than usual, and sometimes does a range, sometimes doesn't. But lastly, his multi-hit attack is a kind of like a drill, essentially, that he'll turn and try to hit you with, and he'll occasionally just stop at using that move, or he'll do a jump stop after the fact. The multi-hit can be parried, while the stomp cannot. If you want to evade the stomp, just dash to wherever the Bone Keeper was before he was about to leap, and you should emerge unharmed. But after beating the Bone Keeper, follow the path up where he was guarding, and you can restart the generator. This will allow you to access the next spot in our journey, which is the Frontier Furnace. The Frontier Furnace serves as a rest spot with a lantern to burn the parasites, as well as an NPC who will give you a very essential talent required to use various ignition hooks around the map. After getting the talent and cleansing yourself of any parasites, head back outside and up the hills toward a Union hook. Upon reaching the top of the hook, follow the given pathway towards the Kirsten village. If you talk to all 3 NPCs at or near the main square, talking to the furthest one away from the town entrance first, then the other 2 will get you a quest. So, that quest is, you must go into Furfire Caverns, which will serve as our next checkpoint in the route to Chaser. Your goal within the caves is to go to the lower depths and find the Spear of Nocti, which will give you a talent that makes your future runs easier, as you'll be able to see through the harsh storm that spawns parasites a little bit easier. Follow the route on screen to get to the spear and ascend out, but make sure to watch out for Bounders and Bone Keepers while you're in the cave. Once you've exited the caves, you can use a Union hook to return to the town. Talk to the village chief hanging around one of the houses, and you'll get the talent Etheron's Gaze. After obtaining the talent, you can head back into the caves to get to the final area that is the biggest obstacle for Chaser. Now, while the caves may have seemed dangerous, just follow the route on screen to get to the entrance of the Nest passageway. Just watch out for mobs and collapsing floors on the way. So, the last major hurdle that we have before reaching Chaser's domain is the Nest passageway. While it looks innocuous, it hides a very dark secret. This passageway will spawn a lot, and I do mean a lot, of Bounders once you initially jump down, so you need to be prepared to book it, as your life quite literally depends on it. So, after running through the Nest passageway, you can jump on top of a short hill and climb across some towers as you proceed towards Chaser's little chapel. Upon arriving, you can talk to him before the fight begins, but make sure you hit him before you talk to him for too long, as he will snake you and just sneak attack you, having your HP lowered before the start of the fight. But with that very long explanation of how to get to Chaser out of the way, let's get into his mechanics and attacks along with his phases. Chaser has one big core mechanic that you need to know about, which are his blood jars. During the fight, you will see him siphoning energy from them, which heals him. Destroying them prevents his healing and also disables some of his moves, which will be discussed later. With that one core mechanic explained, however, let's get into his first phase attacks. Chaser's spike drop will cause several spikes to fall from the ceiling, doing massive damage to anyone hit. If you don't want to be hit, simply go to the edges of his arena and you should be okay if you hold block while facing him. Chaser's grab will release a singular tendril that attempts to grab the player and smack them towards the center of the arena right below Chaser. This move can only be dodged, so just be prepared to dodge it right before it reaches you. Chaser's multi-hit move is a pretty straightforward move. He sends out 3 tendrils of blood to attack you. These deal medium posture damage and decent damage, but they can be parried and dodged. I would treat it just like Primadon's stomp move, and you should be okay. Chaser's Pillar of Flame attack will spawn a sigil underneath you that you can either parry or dodge in order to avoid a Pillar of Flame ragdolling you for an extended time and setting you on fire. Chaser's Blood Wave sends out 3 Blood Waves to attack everybody that's in the arena. You can simply jump over these to avoid them, but if all of Chaser's blood jars have been destroyed prior to him using this attack, no waves will spawn at all and it will be cancelled. With all of his moves discussed, this brings us to Chaser's Cycle, which he'll do a finite number of attacks before becoming fatigued and floating down so you can actually hit him. This is your chance to get damage on Chaser before he becomes invulnerable again and does more attacks. After a certain amount of time, he'll fling everybody back, becoming invulnerable again. After enough damage has been done to Chaser, he'll move on to his second phase, collapsing the ceiling with a ton of spikes falling down aimed at you. You will hear a rumbling noise and your screen will start to shake, so make sure to get to the edges of the arena in order to avoid all of these falling spikes. Chaser's second phase continues much the same as his first, with the only changes being that he no longer uses his falling spikes move, and he can now go into a frenzy state after a certain amount of moves, which basically means he'll decrease the interval between his attacks, so he'll just start spamming attacks a little bit more. But once you've done a sufficient amount of damage in his second phase, Chaser moves to his third and final phase. This is the Schizophrenia phase, as Chaser starts to completely freak the fuck out. A circle will spawn in the center of the arena, while everywhere outside of that circle, you'll take small ticks of damage in pretty short intervals. But there's 2 strategies you can employ here to counter this damage. You can stand in the center of the circle and parry Chaser as he slams into the ground, or you can stay outside and abuse healing / dodging to just deal with the minor pokes of damage. But if you're low, I suggest trying to stay near the circle. While Chaser is slamming himself into the ground, he will do 2 final attacks before his death. After the final attack, he will slam himself into the ground a couple more times before he disappears for good. Congratulations! Your newfound knowledge has helped you defeat Chaser and become ready for what lies beyond, if you dare go down.